Hello, Genies. Before we get started, Rich and I want to let you in on some even more exciting updates for our Patreon subscribers.
As you know, Patreon is a site where listeners can pledge a small monthly amount, either $5 or $10, to support the cost of bringing you your favorite podcast. All patrons get early access to new CutOff Jeans episodes before they're released to the public.
But the most exciting new perk is that all of our patrons will be able to listen to an exclusive bonus episode of the podcast every other week. Topics include personal stories that I'm not ready to share publicly, conversations with family and friends.
And sometimes we'll devote an entire episode to other subjects we love, like musical theater or classic television.
Rich and I enjoy bringing you the CutOff Jeans podcast, and it would mean so much if you would consider supporting our labor of love.
Just go to patreon.com/cutoffjeanspodcast.
Thank you so much, my Genies.
And now, on with the show. Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip, hip, hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Jeans.
Welcome to CutOff Jeans, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I am Julie Dixon Jackson. I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the co-host and producer of this podcast. Happy New Year, Julie.
Happy New Year. Okay, so we were thrown off because I used a clapboard, like a filming clapboard, because, okay, here's a little inside baseball.
Oh, please.
When we record so that we can line up the tracks, Rich goes 1, 2, 3, and then we clap so that the
waveforms.
What is it? The pattern.
The waveforms.
The waveform like shoots up, and so he knows exactly where to line us up.
Right. Otherwise, we would be out of sync like a foreign film.
Exactly. And so for Christmas, my husband decided to buy me a clapboard that I'll here. There. Like what they use in movies when they're like such and such take one, and then somebody gets in front of the camera and they do that.
Yes.
He bought me that because apparently when I clap, it echoes through the house.
Oh, my gosh. You should bring it to a performance next time and just use it to clapboard to clap for somebody.
Clap,
so turn to your husband's passive aggressively and say, "Is this better?" So, Julie, since we last spoke, what is going on with DNA news?
All right, I got a couple things I want to talk about today. And this first one, I would like to preface it by saying I love Kristen Chenoweth.
Okay.
I think everybody loves Kristen Chenoweth. I think she's a great ambassador for the musical theater community. I think she is supremely talented and a light.
Yes. And adopted.
And she's adopted. And therein lies the rub.
Aha.
Because as an adoptee, she's very high profile, and she gets to anything that she says is going to influence people as to what to think about adoption. Mm. And there is this clip rolling around of when she was on Hoda and Jenna, I guess, promoting her new children's book.
Okay.
And it's really triggering for a lot of us. And I'm gonna quote you the conversation, how it starts out. Hoda, I understand you were adopted. Kristen, yes, I like to call it rescued. My dad says, boy, didn't we win the lottery? And I say, no, I won the lottery. I just love the whole adoption is a great option. And then I also adopted my pup, which inspired this book. My parents always said the lady that had you in her belly could not take care of you the way she wanted to, and she loved you so much. This is what my mom said. She gave you life, but we gave you a life. Then she goes on to talk about the book, which is about adopting a dog, using all the same language used when she talked about adoption is an option. So, you've heard me say many times that I wish we had a celebrity, an adopted celebrity who had a platform that could help us to elevate our voices for those of us who have had trauma and do believe that there is trauma with being adoption and have felt the inequity in life that many adoptees feel.
Yes.
So what do you think about all that?
Well, I understand that Kristen Chenoweth has an image of she's like a little pixie girl, and she's always very sunny and positive and almost cloyingly so. And I love her. I think she's super talented. But I mean, every time I've seen her, like her whole persona exudes this
positivity.
She doesn't like to talk about negative things. Like for instance, she's pro-gay rights, but she's also a Christian. And so she tries, I've heard her try to walk the line with that as well. And she just tries to keep it. I just want to love everybody and all that kind of thing. So I think that what you quoted her as saying sounds like it is part of her whole persona and outlook. Yeah. This is the image she chooses to project to her public. And so it didn't seem out of line to me, but I do understand what you're saying in terms of
Sure, the average person isn't going to see it as out of line because all they know is adoption is beautiful.
Yeah, and honestly...
And here we are killing ourselves trying to elevate our voices and our lived experience, and it's just so frustrating because the only... And, we've talked about this before. The only time that I feel like a celebrity has said anything that could be deemed as a negative about adoption, and that was the football player... What's his name? The kneeling football player.
Kirkpatrick or
Colin
Kirkpatrick.
Colin.
Oh, wait, you're asking me football names? Come on now, Julie. Have you met me? But I know who you're talking about. Kaepernick.
Yeah,
yes.
And everybody knows Kaepernick.
Okay.
Colin Kaepernick.
Kaepernick, yes. Oh my God. I knew Kristen Chenoweth.
In his book, he wrote stuff about being a biracial or an interracial adoptee.
Yes.
And he just told a very true story about what it was like for him to experience the internalized racism from his parents. And that is not saying his parents were racist, but they said something that they thought was completely acceptable to say to a black person.
Right, I remember we talked about this. But he, as a black person,
felt disconnected. Exactly. So yeah. What is even more cloying about the whole thing is that she starts out by comparing animal adoption to human adoption, which is what we deal with every day.
Right.
And as an adoptee, she should see that.
Yeah,
I feel.
Yeah.
And in fact, I will say that animal adoption is more humane than human adoption, because in animal adoption, it's required that puppies and kittens stay with their litter for at least 8 weeks.
That's true.
And adoptees are ripped from the arms of their birthing person, the one person that they expect to see and that are already internally bonded with. And are instantly altered. Their brain is instantly altered.
Although my dog might not agree with me, I think we treat our pets better than we treat other people sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Sure we do. And especially, but isn't it funny how that is never even, with all of the reasons that adoption is not a great option, that one is huge. That we can't, that it actually does damage to a child's brain and affects them the rest of their life, whether or not they realize it. And I know a lot of adoptees, obviously, Kristen has had a charmed life, has probably not even had an opportunity to explore inner feelings or inner trauma that she may have experienced as an adoptee. Because she's this person that has this amazing talent that her parents recognized immediately. And even though it didn't come from them, but they chose to nurture it and help her and support her in it.
Yes.
So, yeah, maybe if I had had that experience along with my trauma, maybe I wouldn't feel so strongly or negative about the toxic positivity when it comes to adoption.
I think that probably that is very true. That's probably the truest thing that you've said about this so far today.
Ever.
Because I feel no, you speak the truth a lot. But what I mean is, in terms of, I don't know. I don't want to kind of rag on Kristen Chenoweth for what she said, because I feel like if that's how she feels, she has the right to feel that way. It is her experience, and like you just said, perhaps if I had been raised in such a way where I felt like my talent was nurtured and whatever, I might not have these negative feelings either. And so I agree with that. And I understand what you're saying in terms of you would love to have a spokesperson who could, who has the public, who's available to the public to voice your concerns about adoption reform.
I wonder if anyone has ever approached her to just say, a lot of adoptees don't feel the way you feel, and we feel like you're kind of betraying one of your own, or because I feel betrayed. And I know she's not doing it purposefully.
Yes.
But it feels like a betrayal because it is so much more complicated than the platitudes that she is perpetuating.
Right. Yeah, I understand that. I also feel like there's this unspoken agreement when someone goes on a show like that. Hoda and what were their names? The morning
Jenna.
show. Jenna, Hoda. I'm still with like Kathy Lee, and
I know.
I'm way back in the day. But anyway,
I think Kathy Lee got alcohol poisoning, so couldn't do it anymore.
that it's supposed to be like when you lead with a question like, "So you were adopted?" They're expecting a positive sunshine story, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying I think that's the expectation, and she gave it to them.
It is. Right. Yeah, she did. I'm going to end with that. And again, I love Kristen Chenoweth. I know people that know Kristen Chenoweth. Yeah. I've been in a room with Kristen Chenoweth. But part of me wants to try to have a conversation with her she's got way more going on than she would ever probably even care about this issue. But anyway.
Well,
I just needed to get that out.
I just, before we close out this conversation, I'll just say that as a gay man, that I don't, I've seen gay people in the media say things that I vehemently disagree with. And I feel like the same kind of thing. I try not to feel betrayed, but at the same time, it makes me realize that even though we all belong to this one subset of humanity, that we do not all share the same views. And I feel like that is what's going on here, is that you are both adoptees and you are both performers, and you share that, but you don't necessarily share the same views on or aspects
True, but
of that.
I don't think she has had an opportunity to hear the other views. I don't think she even realizes how many of us are out there that have genuine reasons to want the system to be changed. And I just feel like yes, you can have a view on something, but in a debate, you need to know both sides of the debate.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I just saw an old TV Dick Cavett interview of Lucille Ball from the early 70s, and he was asking her about feminism, and she was against it. And here's this woman who, as she said, that she had been liberated her whole life because she was such a trailblazer, working mother and wife. But she didn't necessarily agree with feminism, and so I thought, wow, that's so interesting to think that at the time.
Well, I think feminism meant something different back then too.
It was also like considered new.
People even today, people don't understand what feminism is.
Right. But I was just using that as a point to say that, like, when something is either new or not that adoption reform is new, but it is relatively new in that it's becoming part of the conversation. I mean, even our podcast has only been around for what, five or 6 years, and we started talking about this. So I feel like, and she just may not be up on that issue, or maybe that is just not the cause she is going to, put her voice behind.
Sure. All right, moving on. All right, I got one more before we break.
Okay.
I just found this story. I thought it was interesting. Hollywood star Jane Russell's adoption of an Irish woman's child in 1952 nearly ended the actress's career. Did you ever hear this?
No.
So Russell had already adopted a girl with her husband, NFL quarterback and kicker Bob Waterfield, but wanted to expand their family, according to this article. News of the star's desire for another child reached Hannah McDermott, a dairy woman then living in London with her husband and young son. Reportedly, Hannah offered her custody of baby Thomas on condition that Jane and Bob provided him a good home, love, and education.
Okay.
When the news made the papers, the controversy rippled across the world, and young McDermott suddenly found her home in London besieged by photographers. Shocking. Local historian Willie Deary told the Belfast Telegraph he believes McDermott was motivated out of love for her child. BS. Hannah came in for a lot of criticism, but I think that what she did was out of love for her child. Again, BS. That is absolute BS. Anywho. And the adoption caused Jane Russell all sorts of grief. Howard Hughes thought all the bad press would finish her, and he ordered her to return the boy. But she stood her ground and refused to give up the child. Baby Thomas was issued with a passport by Ireland's London embassy, where staff were oblivious to the child's true need for documentation. After the scandal broke, a government memo circulated claiming that the entire incident was a publicity stunt by Russell, and that one of the guarantors of the passport's application had explicitly stated the baby was not being adopted. And it was not just Irish civil servants who had the wool pulled over their eyes. British legislation had come into force the year before, banning such adoptions, and Home Secretary Sir Maxwell Fyfe told Parliament 9 days after the adoption that authorities believed the child was traveling to America for a 3-month holiday. Today, both Bob Waterfield and Jane Russell have passed away, and their son Thomas, so I guess he stayed with them, remains in the United States, reportedly living in Arizona. He was one of thousands of Irish children adopted by American couples during the 1950s. Most of them, unlike Thomas, were born outside of wedlock, and state papers revealed that as many as 10 a month were placed in U.S. homes. Back then, the Irish government played a little role. We've talked about this before, restricting themselves to issuing each child with a passport, trusting the Catholic Church's vetting of prospective parents. Yeah. It's disturbing on many levels.
Well, yeah. I mean, anytime somebody says, "Here, take my child," it's got to be a wrenching decision. And
I mean, what the heck?
Yeah, I don't know.
How can anybody believe that they're, especially if child who has been with them is obviously a young child.
Yes.
But is not a newborn.
Right.
So knows them as his parents. What does he think? It was an official legal adoption where his name was changed.
Yeah.
I find that stunning and just abhorrent that the child's parents offered him up.
Yeah,
I love also that just the mother is the one that was given crap for it because he had two parents.
Like the father had nothing to say in the matter.
Yeah, exactly. He was helpless.
Yeah, and it was a 2-parent household.
Yes, it was a 2-parent household.
So you can't even argue that she just didn't have the money to raise a child by herself.
They may have been poor, yes, indeed, but essentially they sold their kid to a Hollywood movie star.
Yeah, yeah.
What the heck?
I can't even imagine. I mean, I know we just talked about how you don't like when people talk about adoption and comparing it to pet adoption, but I'm going to do that just now. Is that I have a family member who had adopted a dog, and then she, after a while, decided that she needed to give the dog away to a new home, and I was really upset about it because I thought, you made a commitment when you adopted that dog to raise this dog, and now you've given it a home and it only knows you, and now you're giving him away. And she had what she considered very valid reasons, but I felt like they weren't valid enough, in my opinion. And
right.
So
that's a dog.
And that's a dog. And
remember that we've talked about this before as well. The rehoming of adopted children's and advertising of the rehoming of adopted children happens on Facebook daily. Daily.
Yeah.
So it's completely legal to advertise children to be rehomed.
Well,
I'm outraged today.
Yeah, I can tell. Did you read about the Pope saying that that he felt that, like, well, we always knew that the in vitro fertilization, that the church frowned upon that, but now he's coming out against surrogacy and saying it's child trafficking.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, just after he supported the gays.
I know, but this has nothing to do with that, other than the fact that a lot of gay couples are using surrogacy to have children. But he wasn't using that as an example. He was just saying that surrogacy sort of encouraged child trafficking. And I mean, there were religious reasons in terms of, like, it's not natural and all that stuff. But, you can argue.
Well, neither is adoption. Hello.
Well, I know. Exactly. But
nothing is natural about people being born to be with somebody that is not their people. That's not natural. And that's not to say that I think unnatural things are bad. But in that case, if we're going to go against surrogacy, calling that child trafficking, then why don't we call adoption what it is, which is child trafficking?
Well, no, because nothing is black or white,
Indeed. That is, and if there's one thing is true that we've talked about today, it is that.
Yeah, for sure.
Should we take a break?
If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Genes Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
Here is my conversation with author and adoptee Julie Ryan McHugh. She has written a book. She's written 2 books, but the one that I recently finished is called Twice a Daughter, and she's going to tell you all about it and her story, and we'll see you on the other side.
Great.
Hi, everybody. I have on the line Julie Ryan McHugh, who is a domestic infant adoptee as well as an author. She has written 2 books, one of which I have read, and by read I mean listened to audiobooks because I lack focus. And that one is Twice a Daughter. Can you tell us what it's called, Julie?
It is called Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, Family, and Belonging. I'm also an identical twin, which we want to add that because such an important part of the story.
Absolutely, and also very clever because it's a double entendre, if you will. Twice a daughter and twice a daughter. Are you an identical twin? Is that something that you discovered later?
You are correct. Okay. So we were told by our adoptive parents, and they were told by Catholic Charities that we were fraternal twins.
I wonder why.
So we start off, through most of our life until we were 48 years old, thinking that's what the deal was. And then when DNA analysis really started to be more popular, we did testing and it came back identical. So for those readers or yourself that has had a good peek at the cover of the book, it's very obvious.
Very. I mean, I know that some not, like, apparently the Olsen twins are fraternal and look identical. So I don't know what the
right. Is and that. I have a daughter that's a OB/GYN, and she said, sometimes you think that you're fraternal and you're really identical. So there's the gene mapping stuff is so complicated.
Why do you think they specified that you were fraternal?
Well, fraternal twins are usually 2 placentas, and identical twins are supposed to be one placenta,
Right.
and the egg split.
Right.
But I think sometimes that's not the case, that there can be more than one placenta for fraternal and identical twins. So I'm not a geneticist, and I'm just going by what my daughter told me. So it's
Oh.
complicated. It's
Okay.
really complicated.
There were
so-
twins in your family?
Both kinds.
Mine too. Yeah. Interesting. I have twin brothers. Everybody's fraternal, though. I have twin biological brothers, and there were twins in my father's. He had twin biological siblings, and every single line on my father's side. So my daughter could have twins too. So you're saying that they assumed that there were two placentas?
That's what we're assuming.
Okay.
This whole information cycle that happens with adoptees, there's a lot of mistakes that are made. And I just assumed for the longest time that somebody just checked the wrong box, My birth mom was a unwed mother, unplanned pregnancy, and I'm sure there wasn't as much care taken with her health and our birth situation, that a lot of mistakes could have been made.
Yeah, absolutely. And they probably weren't even considered mistakes. They probably didn't even think it would come back. And you know what I mean? That time, they didn't think the truth would out.
The adoptee story is when you start heaping up all of those mistakes on top of one another, we start to get angry about it.
Yes.
And my poor adoptive parents really had no information, so they did the best they could with what they were told. They were just so thrilled to have twins in an instant family, and the rest of the story was that my parents adopted a boy 2 years after us, and then they had 3 biological kids. So my sister and I were the oldest of this very blended family back then, and we always knew we were adopted and never really felt like we were treated any differently than the younger siblings. So,
okay, so that was never something that resonated for you, that you felt like they were more loved than you, or
no, if anything else, and I do like to talk about this, because of being a twin, we caught so much attention from people. And so it was really easy to hide behind that twindom and not have to talk about the adoption piece. I didn't know any adoptees growing up.
Yeah, I didn't either, as far as I knew. Come to find out, they were everywhere.
Yes, because it was a stigma, probably more brought on by our parents, because their infertility issues were what was driving the family building by adding adoption. But so it really, it wasn't not discussed in my family, but it wasn't discussed outside the household.
Right.
I remember very uncomfortable conversations with peers asking, so do you know what happened to your real parents? And that was a very sticky conversation for me back then, and it still is. Because
the word real, it's such a strange thing to...
To me, both of sets of parents are real,
Everybody's real. There's just more of them.
Right. Right. Natural parents, yes, but I don't know. The terminology has gotten more positive and more gentler, which is probably better for adoptees in this day and age. But I don't know about you, but I remember, and I still slip this out, instead of saying being placed for adoption, I still say I was given up for adoption.
Me too. Always.
Yeah.
I was not chosen. I was not. That's another one that irritates me, because no, I was not chosen. There were not a variety to choose from. I was available. And if they didn't want me, the next couple would have gotten me. There was no choosing.
No choosing. Yeah. So, I do definitely feel like I was given up, or I gave up a lot of things by being an adoptee. And it took most of my life to try and figure it out, which is tremendously satisfying as to be at the other side of that whole process.
What is your goal in writing these books now? What kind of impact do you want to have going forward with this information that you are giving to?
So my crazy story about having this breast biopsy and going in for that and coming back and having my husband say, you have to get at this. You have to figure out what your medical history is because we have 4 kids. I wasn't happy that he put me in a position where I had to do that. Now I'm forever grateful to him because it changed my life having gone down that road. But the story is so crazy because not only am I a twin, but it took us 5 years to get to the other side of knowing the history on both sides of our family. My adoptive mom was a stinker. She had always said she was going to be supportive should we ever decide to do this. And when it appeared in her life, she was not happy. She was not supportive. I was also 50 years old because, like, at this point in your life, what are you afraid of, Mom? But she was afraid she was going to have a severed relationship with her 2 daughters. So there was all this conflict, and having had to use an intermediary, an adoption agency, a social worker, I used a genealogist, I used a private investigator. Anybody that I told the story to, people were like, I hope you're writing a book about this.
Right.
And so the responsibility was put on me. Well, do I really want to write about this? Do I know how to write a book? No. I had to take classes. And at the end of the day, I wrote Twice a Daughter because I felt like I owed it to the adoption community to help them learn from my mistakes. There were things that I shouldn't have done. And I didn't want other people to make those mistakes. I also wanted people that were stuck or had given up in their adoption search to say, oh, I didn't try this. I didn't try hiring a genealogist to figure out what happened to my birth father because his name is not on my birth certificate.
Right.
And that was very successful for me. So the book was meant to be a how-to, inspirational for those people that needed it. But what ended up happening, because the book is 2.5 years old now, is so many people, adoptive parents, birth mothers, family members of those of us in the adoption world have learned something from the story. Adoptive parents say, I always wondered if my child thought about this. And now you're telling me that they do. And
they all do.
We all do, and we don't want to talk about it, and we don't want to admit it.
And then we don't want to make anybody uncomfortable.
Yeah, but if a parent knows that their child might be thinking this, they're going to parent them a little different.
Yes.
They're going to be more empathetic to mood swings or, gosh, I was a big journaler in high school, and boy, I just ripped my adoptive parents to shreds. Of course, most kids do that, but I also was angry at that time that I had all of these identity issues and there was no way to solve it. And so that journal was a big repository for all of that stuff.
Absolutely.
So Twice a Daughter became kind of the voice of adoptees for parents to benefit from. I also, as you know, was part of this adoption support group through Catholic Charities. And that was very pivotal for me in finding understanding about some of the obstacles I had with my birth parents. My birth mom initially did not want any contact with my sister and I had all these health issues I was trying to resolve. My birth father's name wasn't on my birth certificate, which meant I had to find her first, and she had to fess up and give me his name.
This was all before DNA testing, by the way, just to,
correct.
for the
yes,
for
so
the
this
listeners.
was all 2011, and DNA analysis at that time was
very new.
Not very new. The database was not strong. I was matching with third, fourth, and fifth cousins, and that wasn't being very helpful at all.
Right.
Now I do match with first cousins, and those people and I have connected in a different way, which is which is good. So while I was writing Twice a Daughter, I also started a blog. It's called That Girl, This Life. It's on my website, juliemchughauthor.com. And a lot of the things I wrote about didn't get put in Twice a Daughter. They either happened after that story ended, or they were follow-up on deeper issues that I didn't address in that book. So a lot of those essays, and I have had some published pieces in journals. I also write a column. I compiled my favorite essays into this new book that just came out in November, and it's called Belonging Matters, Conversations on Adoption, Family, and Kinship. So it's a lot about family. It's about adoption, tough conversations I had with my birth mom, my adoptive parents, and things that adoptees think about, but we don't really talk about, like family reunions. My birth mom doesn't invite me to any of the family reunions.
Right.
And the family reunions that I went to growing up, I loved them. They were fun. I felt like I belonged. I mean, legally I belonged there, but something's off with it. You know that you're only there because of the legalities of your adoption. You're not genetically related to the people.
Yeah, and that's confusing and makes you feel other.
And triggering, and triggering about your adoption. So those are the kinds of topics that I address in this new book, Belonging Matters, because I think there's people that we're comfortable with that are not our family, and they become kin. I had a wonderful set of my parents' friends. We called them aunt and uncle. They took us on vacation with them. They didn't have any daughters. They loved the idea of twins. And I consider them family, but I am not biologically related to them, and certainly not through adoption was I related to them. So I explore the boundaries of what family is and kinship is.
Yeah. And it's a series, you said it's a series of your essays.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, cool. Good to know. I wanted to circle back a little bit. So your health problems were the impetus to begin looking for your roots, obviously, because we all deserve to have our health history. And so for me, it was no surprise to my parents when I started looking for my mother when I was 18. Basically, it was like I was going to do it. They knew I was going to do it because of the vast difference between us and my life of feeling disconnected and I just needed to know why I was this way when they were that way. Why did you wait until the health issues why had it not occurred to you to look for your biological family? Not that there's anything wrong with that, absolutely. I'm just curious as to what, people's thoughts are on that.
I had tried when I was, first I knew it was a closed adoption and that my parents didn't have any information. And then when I was 30 years old, I wrote a letter to Catholic Charities in Chicago and asked for information. And I got a letter back that said, no information can be shared at this time. So I knew that it had to do with the adoption laws and that there wasn't really anything I could do.
Okay.
And then in 2011, at the same time that I was having this health scare, because I didn't actually get breast cancer, it just was a scare, the laws in Illinois changed. And adoptees could access their original birth records, which was a wonderful thing for adoptees in Illinois. It was spearheaded by a fellow adoptee who's a senator, and she got this groundbreaking rule passed through. What was so interesting, and I think this is very common from our era, I was adopted in 1959, my original birth record had terrible information on it. My birth mom used an alias, which was perfectly legal and very encouraged for birth mothers to hide their identity and secure their privacy. Also, as I already mentioned, my birth father's name was not on that. And it in the space where his name was, it said legally admitted. So, I mean, parental rights were different back then. Nowadays, birth fathers have the right to, relinquish, and their rights are violated by not being able to say, yes, I agree to the adoption.
So what does legally omitted mean?
It means that the laws provided for the birth father's name not to be required on the birth certificate.
And was there any? Did they? Because I was born and adopted in Australia, and things are a little different. At that time, was there ever any effort or mechanism to contact the biological father? Purported.
Her intake interview with Catholic Charities basically said that they had no plans to marry. He was not Catholic. She was.
Right.
In the Catholic faith at that time, everybody had to be Catholic. So somebody had to convert, and he wouldn't do it, which religion was a stumbling block for them. And certainly they fought about it, which is too bad. She didn't stay in the town that they were. She took a train to Chicago and lived in a woman's home with her friend through the duration of her pregnancy. And she had no idea she was pregnant with twins.
Yeah, that must have been a shock.
And also at that time, they were very encouraged not to hold or see their baby before they placed them for adoption.
And I think that is probably the biggest, most damaging thing.
I do too.
That has ever happened to adoptees.
I'll admit that. The birth mothers that were in my support group said it was, the shame that they were experiencing with their family, with the relinquishment, and, how they damaged their family's reputation, whatever. But then on top of that, not being able to see or hold their baby was a traumatic loss.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you feel, well, you had a sister. I used to fantasize as a child that I had a twin somewhere. But you actually did, and you were raised with her. Do you think, well, you kind of alluded to it already, that maybe it was the fact that you were twins made it less about that you were an adoptee as a child? When you are a twin, you don't understand how different that it is. But now that we're adults, our relationship is still so strong. And I relied on her. I know what a privilege it was to have been raised with a full sibling. We look alike, obviously
share ideas and thoughts and ideas. It's crazy. One of the things that's been really fun about having published this book is I have met through social media 5 sets of adopted twins through Catholic Charities, because Catholic Charities had a mission of keeping multiple birth babies together.
Well, that's one good thing.
It's one good thing.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun to share stories with these women, because one in particular, she and her identical twin have had similar experiences to my sister and I with the breast cancer scare, and other siblings in their family that were also adopted. So it's been really fun to make those connections.
Yeah, I bet. Did any of your history as an adoptee manifest when you started having children?
So I have 4 children, and 3 of them played college sports. My husband, fairly athletic, but it was a joke between us. We called it the mystery gene from my side of the family. And my twin sister's son played college baseball, but he also played in the minor leagues baseball. So that athleticism was crazy. And we always wondered, where did this come from? And when I was searching for my birth parents, I found out that my birth father played college football.
Right.
And that's where it comes from. So it was really fun to finally figure that out. And I guess who to give credit to, but it's been fun for my kids, to know what their history is. One of the other things, the crazy thing that came out that I never saw coming, and I'm still grappling with, is that I am Native American. My birth father was a quarter Chippewa from Minnesota. That was never indicated to my adoptive parents. And I don't look Native American, but there, once you start looking at your own children, you see certain traits. One of my daughters is very olive-skinned. We don't have any Italians in the family, so I'm assuming that that is part of that heritage. I'm fascinated by, having that in my history. I do feel cheated that I didn't know that, that here I am, a middle-aged adult, and I can't identify with it because I don't know the culture. I don't understand, like my birth father grew up on the edge of a reservation. Oh, wow. Extreme poverty, and his athleticism was what rose him out of poverty, and he became a college player, but also he ended up achieving higher education. So there's so much background that I would have enjoyed knowing about as a kid. You know those little moments when your kids are going to school and they've got to do like this family story.
Yeah, that's a big one for me.
Yeah, it's a big triggering point, right? Because we don't have anything, so they got to pick your spouse's side of the family and you're just kind of left off. And I often think that would have been so cool to go to school and say, yeah, I have my great-great-grandmother was a Chippewa princess in Canada, and this is what she looks like. But we didn't have any of that.
Right.
They have it now, but here's the other piece of not having my birth father's name on my birth certificate. Because his name is not there, it means that I cannot claim to be part of the Chippewa Nation. So another big, nope. Okay. Not even with DNA. If they change the ruling, perhaps. But because his name is not on there, I can't say I belong to the Chippewa Nation. So another injustice.
Yes, another injustice. From what I understand, the First Nations people don't recognize DNA.
Right.
I believe that's what that whole thing is, and so I don't know. It's very complicated. Yeah. So have you taken a DNA test?
Yes. So I took the DNA test with my twin sister to prove we were identical. And then
right. Yeah.
I did find some birth siblings. I'm not going to give away the end of the story of Twice a Daughter, but I did find some birth siblings that we did do a DNA testing.
Have you tested at Ancestry?
Ancestry and 23.
Okay. And does your Native American show up in your good? Good.
Yeah, it's actually very small, which is fairly interesting.
Well, a quarter. I mean, even if you were a quarter, like you said, your great grandmother was Native American.
Great grandmother.
You're two times. Yeah, that it's going to be small, and also she may not have been 100% either.
She wasn't.
Yeah. It's pretty significant. Is there anything that you would like to specifically talk about?
You know, I really want anybody who is working through the process of trying to find their biological relatives to not give up. Just when you think that you're done, something happens, or you find another way into the story, another workaround. And so I encourage people to really, go as far as you can, take a break, go back to it, find another angle in, because it's very rewarding when you do figure something out.
Absolutely.
A piece of your own little puzzle, which you deserve to know. All of us deserve to know any piece of information out there that relates to us. And I think this is the big controversy with closed adoption is what trumps what? Is it the right to privacy that trumps the right to know? And why is that? Is that because an adoptee is an infant and they can't exercise their rights?
Of course.
Like, who decides that the birth parent's privacy is more important than an adoptee's right to know that breast cancer runs in their family or colon cancer or what have you? I think that is the discussion that still needs to be made.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I feel like the conventional narrative that we're still dealing with is that adoption is nothing but beautiful, and that is more important than anything else that we as adoptees with lived experience have experienced. I feel like the more that I speak out about these unfair practices and anything about being an adoptee really is when people will come out of the woodwork and tell you that you're ungrateful for not just accepting what you got and you're lucky to be alive.
And Julie, and those people usually are not touched by adoption.
No, but they have a friend who was adopted and is fine.
Yeah, well, that friend is, I was fine until I wasn't. Me
too. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what you're doing with this podcast, the books that I'm writing, it's the conversation. It's going to take a long time for the greater community to understand that adoption is complicated. It is beautiful, but it's also a searing loss for everybody involved.
Yes.
Adoptees lose identity, birth parents lose the ability to raise a child, and adoptive parents are in it because they have infertility issues. It's not a pretty picture for everybody. Right. It can have a good outcome. I love my parents. My siblings that I was raised with were so appreciative when I went out and figured out what my story was. They were supportive. I know that that's not the case across the board. Mm-hmm. I had a good family I grew up in. However, I still, like, as we've been saying, there are things I feel cheated about. I felt cheated. I didn't have my medical history.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was Native American. I'm later in life getting at all this and talking about it. But I think, and this is something that I would also say to the younger adoptees out there, I had a lot of lived experience, a lot of disappointments and coping strategies because I was a middle-aged person in dealing with the setbacks in my search. When you are a younger adoptee, it's hard to put some of this stuff in perspective.
Oh, yeah.
And I do think there is some wisdom that comes with age in this respect.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the most important thing is that adoptee voices need to be elevated to at least the level of the multi-billion-dollar adoption industry and adoptive parents and their experiences. Because even though they think their children are okay, most adopted children don't feel safe in expressing what they're really going through.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's definitely the case.
Julie, thank you so much for talking to me today. Can you list both of your books one more time so everybody can read them?
Okay. The Twice a Daughter, A Search for Identity, Family, and Belonging. That's my memoir about my adoption search with my twin sister.
It's great.
And Belonging Matters, Conversations on Adoption, Family, and Kinship is a series of essays.
Wonderful. And your website is?
JulieMcGueauthor.com.
Wonderful.
You can search for my blogs and anything else on that site.
That's great. Julie Ryan McGue, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Julie. It was really fun.
All right. Thank you so much for that conversation, Julie. I had a great time talking to her. And as you heard, you know where you can find Julie and her website.
Great. In that case, I am Richard Castle, and you can visit my website, richardcastle.com, and find out all things Richard Castle, where you can follow me on X or on Instagram at Castle Songs.
And I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. You can find all things Julie Dixon Jackson at cutoffjeans.com. And also find me on TikTok at Jenjeannie Jules Jackson and other places like that. Don't forget to join the active Facebook group. It's a group, Cutoff Jeans Podcast.
What else do you want to say, Julie?
The truth is in your jeans.